This interview will explore how Nujoma's vision for social and economic development shaped the strategies within the business sector, particularly through the lens of Sam Geiseb's experiences as the former CEO of the Namibia Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Sam Geiseb, very good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us to come talk about your namesake, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Much obliged, much obliged. As I've said in my previous engagements and conversations with many people that have come and showed us the different facets of Dr. Sam Shafashuna Nujoma's life, everyone has got a unique story. So we'd like to hear your story before we delve into Sam, the CEO. Talk to us about your first encounter and with the man, Dr. Sam Nujoma, and what you heard about him before meeting him.
Well, I think some of us encountered the founding president's vision before we actually saw him. As a young Namibian and as part of the student activism, many of us hear about the man's vision long before he returned in 1989. I was fortunate, of course, not only to hear of his vision from the student movement's activities, but also from my own father, who is himself a revolutionary and was a leader in the movement here. But that vision was a vision of a free and independent Namibia, where its people work towards developing the country, and that's pretty much what we were all excited about when we wanted to see Namibia free and independent. And many of us, of course, were at the time hoping that independence comes with the leadership that he was providing outside the country. There were others that were leading us here inside the country. But I think, as I said, we encountered the late president's vision long before he returned again. And all of it was about when we were singing the Sema Oliponi songs and other liberation songs, when we were actually part of the student uprising here. And my first encounter, of course, physically with the late president was when, as part of the student movement, student leadership, we were invited to see him in Vanaheda when he had a house there. And one of the first things when he encountered us that he told us was, "You students, the country is free now. Now you must go and study, and you must come back and work for your country." And some of us heeded that call. I was at the time a student in South Africa. I went back to study in South Africa and came back. And of course, later on joined organizations like the NCCI. And my first real encounter with him as a business leader was when, as an acting CEO, actually, I had the privilege to go to the State House and talk to him about one of the important membership categories that we introduced then, which was the national corporates. And we wanted to create a platform where not only the president, but also important economic ministries would engage larger companies in a dialogue that was aimed at developing the country. And he was quite excited because he believed in the partnership between government and private sector, and he believed in the role that the private sector had to play in terms of developing and making sure there are jobs, there is wealth being created, and in so doing that there is contribution towards rising the living standards of our people. And he was always very straightforward. The president I came to know as somebody who was a doer. I remember when the chamber had some challenges, I also went to see him. One of the things that we were talking about was to own a space for the chamber. So I went to see him, and he asked me, "What is the problem, Mr. Geiseb?" I said, "In fact, we would appreciate if your government can help us as the chamber to own our own premises from which we can operate." And then he said, "Have you spoken to the Minister of Trade?" At the time, late Hidipo Hamutenya was the minister. And he said, we've been talking to them. And he said, "I'll come back." And he actually went and picked up the phone and called the minister to come to State House. And the minister was there in 20 minutes. In fact, he said, "In 20 minutes, I want to see you." And we were sitting around the table, and the president, the late president, said, "By the end of this week, I want the chamber to own the house." At the time, the house belonged to another party. And that is how I encountered the president. Of course, he believed in partnership between government and private sector. And so he was quite keen also for that platform to be established. And that platform was intended to become a regular platform, almost an annual platform, where the business community would engage his government on issues of importance and of economic development.
I think many people can agree that communicating a vision is one of the most frustrating things, that one can do, because now you are seeing beyond, and you are surrounded by all these people who are not able to understand or comprehend what the vision is truly all about. When you look at the way the late president communicated his vision, what was his style in terms of saying, "Look, this is where we want to go, and you need to play part of this journey. You need to play your role. You need to play it seriously if we're going to get to that vision"? Were there some times where you felt like, I don't know what this man is talking about, but let me just nod my head? Or did you walk away understanding that, wow, the vision is very, very clear, and I know the part that I need to play, and I need to play it as seriously as I can?
I've always believed that vision is vested in leadership. And you will always find that the masses will come along. But it is a process that you have to undertake to bring them along. But when the late president was basically speaking, I mean, let's start with the idea of a mixed economy, for instance. My understanding of that was that both private sector and government would participate in the economy and develop this country. And therefore, that vision recognized a significant and important role that private sector has to play in bringing prosperity to the country. Now, at the time, of course, at independence, the incoming government was viewed as almost a socialist, communist government,
absolutely, yeah.
to be. And when that policy was coined, visionary as it is, it was about actually allaying fears, and it was about bringing different aspects of the country together to actually understand, okay, we actually need to work together to make this work. So private sector needs to play its role, government needs to play its role, because without an enabler, which is the role that the government plays, private sector also will have challenges. But the president was very strong in actually not only communicating his vision, but also acting on it. And when you look at my experience at the chamber, if you actually, in hindsight, if you look at it, you will see that as a liberation hero outside the country, as part of the frontline states, having an observer status on the SADC coordinating committee, then he was already laying groundwork for regional integration. He was already laying groundwork for trading into the region. And when the country became free, I mean, the president was basically giving action to what he saw. So when we were sitting around, we would say, when are you actually going to Zimbabwe? There is a Zimbabwe International Trade Fair. And I think many of you will remember that the president would be loading business people full of the plane when he was flying.
True.
Few times. Of course, criticized many times, but it was part of his vision, and he was actually acting on it. He would go and show business people how others are doing business down there. And he was not afraid to promote what he believed in.
So in other words, you had no excuse for not performing.
Absolutely.
He had given you,
absolutely,
the opportunity to go see how other people are, are acting it out.
And he was acting on it. He wasn't basically saying, you go and do it. He was saying, okay, let's get on the plane, let's go see Zimbabwe International Trade Fair, how people are doing trade fairs. We must bring those things to Namibia. And his idea was always go learn, bring what is good back here and implement it. And a lot of those we tried. And in the region we did. And of course, even in terms of supporting private sector, the president was quite keen on making sure that we are participating in regional integration talks. He always had this thing when the chamber came to him. He said, no, my government has got money. Why do you have a problem going? That was his attitude. Safe to say that he would also at times ask, where is the private sector? Especially when policy discourse and those issues were at play.
Sam, as we wrap up this conversation, I always like to have our guests give a nugget of knowledge, if I may put it that way, to the younger generation. And speaking from the point that you were a young person at that time, entrusted with this great responsibility as well to help develop this country. Now, many of us are sitting at home clueless, but willing to do what it needs to what needs to be done to also to contribute to the development of this country. What lessons can we draw from your generation that you drew from their generation as well, in terms of us also finding our space, our place, and also, of course, our role in terms of contributing to Vision 2030, Agenda 2063, and all these others to also lay a foundation for the younger generation to come to build on?
I think what is important and critical is to look at yourself as a young person and say, what is it actually that at this point in time I can offer? And many times you have to ask yourself, do I have a skill to offer? Do I have some sort of entrepreneurial talent to offer? Not all of us need to have the same journey to make a contribution. I believe it's critical that as a young person you tell yourself, well, maybe I need to stay in school. Maybe I need to acquire a skill. Maybe I need to start something. Because Namibia, and I think under the leadership of the late president, and of course presidents that have come after that, and many of the other leaders, I think the enabling environment has been created for young people to grab opportunities, to build competencies and skills that will make them more useful citizens and allow them to actually make a positive contribution to the country. So it's important that you don't run around with a grade 12 certificate that has nothing on and think you can actually just make a contribution. If that is your ambition, we can only draft you into the army and the police and maybe some of those. But I think it's critical that we focus as young people on developing skills that gives us the competencies to make a contribution. And I think partly the youth problem that we have in Namibia is as a result of us maybe not following that route in terms of acquiring the necessary skills and competencies and then actually having a skill to offer at the end.
All right, Sam Geiseb, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your insight. And like I mentioned to some people that, there's so many stories to tell about this towering figure that is Sam Nujoma. But we do appreciate the little meal that you have also brought to this banquet of meals that we have had so far in the form of stories and experiences about the late Dr. Sam Nujoma. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Much obliged.
Sure.
With this, Sam Geiseb, the former NCCI CEO from 1998-2001, also just sharing his memories and his personal stories in relation to the late Dr. President Sam Nujoma, and also just giving a piece of advice to young people as well, like many others have been doing. Stay tuned.